Hello everyone, it's me again, and I'm here with another What If video. And I thought this would be important since, this month is Valentine's Day, and I had the urge to make some Valentine what ifs. So one of these will be, what if Lloyd and Harumi were childhood friends? I actually think this could have been a lot more possible and realistic than what ended up happening. Like, it didn't make a lot of sense that Harumi would go after Lloyd of all the ninjas because, like, seriously, Lloyd had nothing to do with this. He was just a kid at that point in time, probably around her age. And she didn't even target all the other ninjas, just Lloyd. Like, all because he was the son of Garmadon? Like, that literally made no sense whatsoever. It made little to no sense. But what if they were childhood friends? I think the way they could do it would have been their mothers could have been old friends. Yes, I think Misako could have been old friends with Harumi's mother. What were they like? They were probably around. I'm going to say they were like archaeologists until they split contact. Like, I'd say sometimes after school, Lloyd would be taken in by Harumi's parents so they could have a play date, or Misako could leave Lloyd with Harumi's parents. But then you have to think about Lloyd being abandoned at his boarding school. I'd say Harumi could have gone to the same school as Lloyd, potentially. She likely would have. But what about, Lloyd and Harumi's eventual paths? They cut contact because Lloyd could send Harumi a letter saying that I'll be gone for a couple of days. I hope to see you again. And Harumi hopes the same thing as well, but little does she know, this is where they're going to Ninjago City with her parents, if you know what I mean. Then the events of season 1, that wouldn't have changed. She wouldn't even know that Lloyd is the Green Ninja. Then the events of everything all the way up to season 8 would remain the same because they just would. Like, there's really no changes other than Lloyd could mention he had a friend that he knew when he was a kid. What about Harumi on the other hand? Apparently she would be plotting something. No, it's not Garmadon's return, it's just more so a way to get the life she once had back. No, that does not mean resurrecting her parents just to get Lloyd back. Even has drawings of him when he was idolizing his father. Something that the Emperor and Empress could have seen. But they would probably tell Harumi that they don't know if she'll see her old friend again. But if she doesn't, she may have to let him go and move on. But they were wrong in season 8 because then you get to Sons of Garmadon where Lloyd and Harumi don't even recognize each other at first. Harumi assumes, like, you're the Green Ninja. I haven't met you until now. But Lloyd senses something familiar in Harumi. And then a big plot twist, like, during the later half of the season, like, when Harumi was done explaining about her parents to Lloyd, she leaves and then Lloyd sees something and turns out to be not only a drawing of him when he was younger, still idolizing his father, but he sees a picture of him in Harumi, and he's like, he couldn't believe it. He puts them away because he doesn't want Harumi to know that he found them. But when Harumi does return, she asks Lloyd if he's okay, and he says, yes, I'm fine. Then everything in season 8 would remain the same up until the very moment when Lloyd got the Oni mask of hatred. Harumi wouldn't try to stab Lloyd. She would take him out with like a tranquilizer dart or something like that. Most likely a tranquilizer dart. And then she would say something like, I'm sorry, Lloyd, but I have to do this for your own good. And apparently Harumi takes the mask, which does avoid the fight they had in the vault. Lloyd is also taken, and then he wakes up in the Temple of Resurrection where he sees his mother and everything they're planning to resurrect Garmadon. Now, what about the fight the ninja had with the SOG? That would still happen. Maybe the other ninja could have came to the conclusion at that point in time, Harumi's not only the quiet one, but also Lloyd's childhood friend. And apparently Harumi's whole motivation here stems from, Lloyd, why can't we go back to who we once were? Why can't things go back to the way they used to be? That kind of thing. Apparently Harumi even feels that after Garmadon became, redeemed, she felt that the ninja don't have a clear arch enemy anymore. She assumed it would be Pythor, but that didn't really stick the landing. And so she decided, you know what? It's not fair anymore that the ninja are just facing different villains and they don't have an arch enemy anymore. And so she decides that the way to solve all this would be bring back Garmadon. Which could have then led to the events of season 6. Not season 6, season 8 remain the same except with 2 changes. A, Harumi is kind of starting to regret bringing Garmadon back, and secondly, Lloyd may have ended up in the first realm, or even maybe both Lloyd and Nia in this case. Season 9 would then happen, where basically the first realm storyline would go out mostly the same, except the ninja, due to them all being in the first realm, they may have escaped the first realm a lot faster. And then you get to the Resistance storyline where, here's what I think. Because they would have more members in this timeline, they may have had a higher chance in stopping Garmadon. But the thing is, Harumi wouldn't, die from a collapsing building. Here's what I think would happen. She sees a family about to get killed by the Colossus. This is horrific because this was, what happened to her parents. And so she kind of like pushes them out of the way. Hey, out of desperation. And apparently she's thanked by the family, and this leaves her in a state of shock. And apparently Lloyd is there, and they kind of have a bit of a fight, but Harumi stops the fight because she saved the family from getting killed. And then they would do the same scene from the original ending of Transformers Dark of the Moon, where Megatron, throughout the whole truce at Optimus is about to kill Megatron until he accepts the truce. So it's kind of like the same thing, except there's no truce, but instead it's just understanding what she did. And what Lloyd does, he reveals to Harumi that he had looked through her private stuff, even giving her the picture of them when they were children with, her parents. Harumi takes the picture and just begins to weep uncontrollably. She's uncontrollably crying because that was the very moment she lost everything. This does lead to Lloyd comforting her by hugging her, and then he kisses her on the cheek, which causes her to stop sobbing uncontrollably. But when she, kind of like becomes a member of the resistance, they're a bit skeptical because of her allegiance to Garmadon. But then, during the final battle, there would be some casualties like Ronin and a few of the elemental masters like Nero, Gravis, and Camille, who may have gone through a redemption arc and may have been like, a spy working for the SOG, I guess. But Harumi, she would basically surrender herself to the police. And then season 9 would end the same. March of the Oni then happens, but here the difference is, I forgot another thing. Mr. E probably would have survived hunted and escaped. But we would have seen the original identity of him being Echo Zane's storyline coming into play. But back to March of the Oni. That season would have remained the same, except Harumi would have, nightmares of the Overlord coming in Ninjago, turning it all into darkness. Not the Overlord. The Oni. And so Lloyd breaks both Garmadon and Harumi free. And then during the fall scene, Harumi would try to save Cole, but what happens is Masako ends up saving Harumi, but she and Cole fall. Cole survives, but Masako dies. This leads to a tense argument between Lloyd and Garmadon about, how Masako's death could have been prevented, but it just wasn't. And Harumi just tells Garmadon to let Lloyd go for now because he needs a moment to himself. And then this does lead to Cole, reuniting with the ninjas. Pretty much the rest of March of the Young got the same, except Harumi would be part of the Tornado of Creation with Garmadon joining. And then Lloyd and Garmadon would find themselves in the same Garden Valley that Lloyd had in his vision, and Garmadon would go with his father to reunite in the afterlife, and Lloyd is sent back to the living world. Now Harumi's about to walk out, but Lloyd tells Harumi to stay because he's trying to give her what she lost years ago, the family they once had. Restore everything. Which does make Harumi tear up, and then she and Lloyd share a kiss. And then there would even be a statue of Garmadon in the ending of March of the Oni. Secrets of the Forbidden Spinjitzu wouldn't have really changed other than the one change I could see is she would theorize that the Ice Emperor may be Zane. And Lloyd would find out that Zane is the Ice Emperor, and that makes the plot twist far less predictable. Because Lloyd knew Harumi was right. Prime Empire wouldn't have changed, except Another change I could also picture in Secrets Forbidden Spinjitzu is Akita wouldn't kiss Lloyd on the cheek, and maybe we would have had a ninja versus Ice Emperor fight where eventually Vex would try to betray Zane and kill him. This does lead to the ninja eventually stopping Vex, where he would probably be frozen and probably killed. I don't know. But they would still save the Neverrealm. But back to Prime Empire. Prime Empire, I would say that fight between Lloyd and Harumi, yeah, he would instead fight Garmadon, an avatar of his father. Whereas Harumi would stay behind in the human world, outside of Prime Empire. Master of the Mountain wouldn't change, except Lloyd wouldn't have, trust issues with Vanya or Racer 7, which would have happened in Prime Empire. Lloyd wouldn't even have trust issues with Akita either. A lot of his trust issues would have been gone. But I could possibly see Harumi and Vanya being BFFs in a way, since they are kind of like princesses, one adopted and are biological. So I could kind of see that, honestly. The island wouldn't have really changed. But I doubt Harumi would, get a job as an archaeologist, even though her mother was once an archaeologist, but still. Not a lot would change. Same thing with Seabound. And then you get to Crystallize, where instead of, her being the one to recruit all the villains, that would have been someone like, I'd say, this was hard at first, but I'm probably going to say one of the Time Twins, either Chronix or Crux. Heck, even Nauticon, so the rest of the ninja can remember Skybound. But Mr. F would be replaced with Mr. E, and then the Mr. E storyline would come to an end when Zane, breaks through Mr. E's reprogramming, and Mr. E would die, I'd say committing suicide, even though this wouldn't happen because it's a kid's show. But he would still die. Apparently, during the final battle, we would replace Garmadon in that very moment when, Garmadon was faking his death. We would have filled in that spot. And we would have actually died. Thus leaving to Lloyd to face the Overlord. And he would have used his only power to destroy the Overlord once and for all. Also, I think Wu would be the one telling Lloyd to not what happened to Garmadon Misako all these seasons ago consume him. So yeah, kind of like what Garmadon did, just replace him with Wu. And then, by the end of the season, you could possibly have there be a time skip epilogue where Lloyd and Harumi now have a son, named Wu Garmadon II. But then what about Dragon's Rising? This is where Dragon's Rising comes into play. By the time of Dragon's Rising, I think the merge would still happen, and Lloyd and Harumi would be separated, even their son, who would have been the same age as his father in the earlier seasons at this point. And so Lloyd is training him to be like a ninja like him. So that's what if Lloyd and Harumi were childhood friends. I know I said this will happen in a later installment in the Ninjago Rewrite series, but you're going to see some differences here and there with what I said. But anyways, I will see you all later.